What's up, everybody, and welcome to the OT Unleashed podcast. I'm so excited to be here with you today, and I have such a really cool special guest that is joining me this afternoon, I guess, and all the way from New York. It is the Rainbow OT, Dev Neu, and thank you so much for being here, Dev.
Hey y'all, how are you doing, Eric?
I'm good. I'm good. And what's cool about this is that we've talked about probably for a couple years now about doing some kind of collab, being together, chatting and everything. And, before we get into all of our segments, it was really so cool earlier in the year that I got to be in person with you at AOTA, which was so neat because there's some people that have really meant a lot to me in the profession, and that I follow closely and see the things that they're doing within our profession, and so I was a little starstruck when I got to physically meet you at conference. So it was really cool.
Well, Eric, I was also starstruck to finally meet you at conference. To me, you were the Eric Johnson. So to be able to meet you and also confirm in person that you were an amazing hugger was super special. But yeah, I've been looking forward to meeting you. I feel like we've always been connected on social media and through other friends like Brock.
Yeah.
And so it's cool to finally have that in-person meeting, which was awesome.
Yeah, that was really neat. And unfortunately, like how conference typically lays itself out is that you get about 6.3 minutes with each individual human that you want to interact with, and then somebody else comes up and distracts you, and then next person. And so it's always like bittersweet that you get some time together, but it's never enough time. So I'm excited that I get a little bit of dedicated dev time this morning. So I'm excited. So today, I was intentionally waiting to have you on the podcast during Pride Month. It is Pride Month, and I've never publicly thrown out any, you know, way I feel about stuff. Now, I've been an ally, an advocate. I loved humans. My philosophy is always just to really throw your love into people in general, and no matter how you feel, love does not have to be limited by agendas or politics or identification or anything. Love can just be love, and you can have a huge heart for humans regardless of how you believe and what you feel. And and I have been so excited to actually have you on because you have such a great way to share the LGBTQ culture, kind of your side of the queer conversation. And this is going to be really I'm so excited about the conversation because of some of the people that I've been surrounded by, and hopefully that message is also received by them really well. And so I'm so excited, and thank you for being able to do this. And I'm so excited that we get to do it in June, in Pride Month. So let's get started now. Dev, you've been an OT for a minute now, but let's tell everybody about your origin story. Like, where did the Rainbow OT come from? How did you decide that you wanted to be an OT? Like, what does that all look like for you?
Yeah, I love this question. I don't have I feel like a super exciting answer to it, but it is fun to kind of look back and connect the dots to what brought me to occupational therapy, I think, in general. So I'm a first generation college student and
Cool.
graduate and person with a master's in my family. So I didn't really, college was like not a thing or a consideration for me until pretty late in high school. So I didn't really do anything to help me get there until like junior and senior year. Just because it wasn't really a path for me until one of my counselors was like, hey, this is a thing that you could do. And so I worked a lot, was super poor. So I just spent like a lot of time working. And one of the places that I worked was this like kids party place where I ended up being a part of developing a night for people who had just different accessibility needs, like children with
Cool.
Down syndrome and autism that really just couldn't have like the same fun experience during the day. And so I
Yeah.
always kind of my mom's a big advocate and activist, and so I've always kind of had this big heart for the underdog or people that really would, benefit from amplification of their voices and stories. And so I was drawn to that world and really like wanted to get into special ed, but was hoping for something, that was a little bit more stable financially or would allow me to do, more things that I wanted to do in my life. So um, loved anatomy, loved psychology, and that kind
Yeah.
of brought me towards OT. So all of those dots kind of, to me at least, make a lot of sense because OT has a bit of each of those things.
Yeah.
And I had my best friend, who I've known since kindergarten, who did early decision to a school that I also liked that was for OT. And so I kind of, that's where the language and the curiosity came from. So I looked into it and was like, that sounds cool. I shadowed nobody. I had never seen it in practice. So I kind of went pretty blindly into a program
Wow.
in Buffalo, New York, and it ended up working out really well for me. I think I'm lucky in that sense, but I went into a BS/MF program where we graduated with both degrees at the end of the 5 years. Though I guess
Cool.
in hindsight, it was a pretty big gamble.
Yeah.
But yeah, it worked out. I went into OT school pretty determined to work in a peds environment and came out of OT school much more aligned with adult and elderly, like complex neuro conditions. And then my own lived experience, my own health needs and experiences in healthcare brought me to what, where you met me at the Rainbow OT, with LGBTQIA plus centered care. And also now what I would say, or more so identify with, is gender affirming care as part
Yeah.
of my specialty. So
That's awesome.
yeah, a blend of all of the things, and kind of just finding my why and what what speaks to me.
Yeah. So, so let's talk just a minute. So you had this, journey that kind of brought you here thinking, hey, I'm going to be peds, which I actually feel like as an educator, so many students that come through those doors are like, I want to work with kids. I want to be a pediatric OT. And then by the time they're done with OT school, they're like, whoa, I didn't realize that we had such a broad scope and we could do so many different things. And you talking about the LGBTQI plus, is that right? So I was going to ask you this question. So if I were to want to, I know that we're trying to be as inclusive as possible, but as we, start identifying different groups, like, is there like a easy way to like say the whole thing without having to remember all the letters? Like, can you just say the queer community? What's coming from you? Like, what's the best way to do that?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I usually just go with LGBTQIA plus community. I think I missed one of the letters there when I said it earlier, but
There,
there are a lot of letters. There's always, usually never enough letters. We could talk all day probably about the reason for that. But I would say you as a straight cisgender person, I probably wouldn't start with queer community. That's a pretty
okay.
sacred word, and it has
Okay.
different meaning to different people. So I identify as queer and non-binary. It probably is those two terms. Overall, just queer. Queer can also be used to describe someone's gender identity. So that's good for me. But there are people, I mean, the history of that word is a pretty strong, like derogatory use.
Yeah.
It's been
Yeah.
used as hateful language. Even, recent, still to this day, depending on location. I'm in New York, so my experience is definitely different than a lot of other folks. But I probably wouldn't start with that term unless the
Sure.
person uses that term, first.
Yeah.
I know you, I trust you, so I'm cool with you using
Okay.
that language. But
Between you and
LGBT
I.
plus community,
Yeah.
yeah, between you and I, that's cool. But we're talking to a space that's larger than that. So
Sure.
for
Yeah.
clarity for other folks,
Yeah.
gay is a term that's been can be considered like an all-encompassing term. So you could say the gay community. That may not work for all folks. So I think if you do LGBT plus, if there's a plus on there, that kind of communicates that you're understanding and inclusive of
Okay.
all the rest of the identities
Okay.
and terms there. So you have
Okay.
some the gay community, queer community, LGBT plus community. that those are good places to start, but the queer one definitely has you need some permission and more context
Okay,
before you
so
use that one.
okay, well that's great because I didn't know that. I thought that it was, something where it's, like I had been, educated at one point, like, the queer community, and I'm only saying that in context, said this is our word, we want to use it for us. And empower that word for our community. And so I thought, as a cisgender, heterosexual male, having, be like, oh, well, I want to make sure that I am also respecting how you want to be called. My thought is like, okay, well, I will say that then because that's what they want to be called, but that's good to know. So, like, it actually, there was a gay couple that wanted to get married and they asked me to do their wedding, and it was two women, and they said, "Do you shoot queer weddings?" And so, if somebody were to say that to me, "Do you shoot queer weddings?" would I then have the door open to say, "Yes, I shoot queer weddings"? Would you say that that's okay, or should I respond like, "I do, yes, I do." Gay weddings, or what would you recommend there if they've opened that door for me?
Yeah, that's a super good question. So the general, language I would use around that is what I call like language matching. And so if someone
Cool.
uses that term to me, I interpret that as usually an open door to, match that language with them. Um, so that's, I think, kind of a direct route. I will say that there's probably an asterisk there, and that there are
Sure.
situations where you might say, hey, yeah, I do, I'm cool with including everyone. Is queer the word you like me to use when referring to like your partnership or the community? You could check in. I don't personally think that's maybe that necessary. I think language matching is usually a pretty safe
Okay.
way to go. So if they say that, you'd be like, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, okay. I like that. And I do like that language matching because I think that, it does give like, hey, I don't want to dance around what you're asking me and whatnot as well. So that's good. So now, Dev, you have done like I love your work. I love all the things that you've done. We've talked about, certain different types of ways that, the community at large can be kind of better advocates or just not even advocates, but just kind in general. And you have blazed some of these trails that have kind of opened up that narrative. And one thing that I've always loved so much about you is how willing you are to answer questions, even if it's questions that sound stupid or like even, for me, like I certainly don't know everything. I'm always learning and want to know more. But what can you tell us about, what are some of the most common areas, some common questions that, the community that doesn't understand the LGBT plus world that you get, from, you mentioned that yesterday you got a chance to talk to a group of people that may have never, heard this talked about. Like, what are some of those common questions and things, the ways that you like to address those?
Yeah, I love this. Over the years, I think my experience with this has changed. I think I would be remiss if I didn't probably relate that to the changes and relationship in current like socio-political
Yeah,
environments. I think that that has definitely changed how we navigate these conversations or topics. I think because there's a lot of changes that are happening that are impacting this community. So a lot of things that we talk about are it comes back to like language
sure.
or under comprehension, right? And so these are 2 points that I usually spend a lot of time with. And so let's just start with being honest about language. All language is made up, like literally
Right.
all language is made up. It was all just created, right? And it changes over time. And so it's very interesting to me that just with certain communities or with certain language, we seem to be like, this language can't exist, it can't possibly
Sure.
change. um but we're so easy to adopt language from other communities like work, slay, riz, like
Yeah.
all of these things
It's
that
lit.
are changes in language that we
Yeah.
understand, right? And so people are like, well, why is there so much new language now? What's up with this, with the
Sure.
youths and this changing, right? And um, A lot of that comes from over the past years, although the current environment's not so safe, fuzzy, and fun. We have more representation, we have more legislation, we have more advocacy, so people have more language and more space to kind of create the language that represents them, and so we should be embracing that.
Yeah,
So a lot of times people get stuck with language, and certain apps people like are super stuck on where it's like cisgender, right?
yeah,
It's not a derogatory term. It's not harmful, right? It just is a term that is communicating that the gender that was assumed of you or assigned to you at birth is the one that you identify with, right?
yeah,
So it's not there's not anything bad with that word. There's not anything bad with cis.
yeah,
Or the abbreviation for that, but people get really uncomfortable with words that are new to them. I think a lot of society has related discomfort to bad. And I would
sure,
encourage people to remind themselves that discomfort is not bad. It feels uncomfortable, but that's a part of growth and that's a part of change and being better. And sometimes that discomfort confirms what you believed before. And sometimes that discomfort leads to change. And that's a part of being a human. It's not bad to be like uncomfortable with a new word. We actually had a large discussion yesterday where two folks in the crowd shared that they didn't like the word cisgender and that they felt like it was like a bad word towards
hmm,
them. And we just had a conversation around like you're not used to the word because can you like when in your life have you had to identify as cisgender, right?
yeah,
Like when has that identity been stripped of you, questioned, needed to be validated, right? That's the dominant term, dominant identity in society. So you're uncomfortable with it because it's never been questioned of you. We're identifying it. It's just a term. It's a name for what, your experience is or communicating that to others, but you've probably never had to like write down that you're cisgender,
yeah,
right? So
yeah,
it's just a moment of privilege there. And I think people just get uncomfortable and they're like, this is bad. I don't like this feeling, but
sure.
um, it's good. It's
Well, would you
okay.
say so? Okay, so I'm gonna go back just a little bit. So, if I were to say, so the difference between cisgender and heterosexual is that cis identifies your identified um, sex at birth. Is that correct? Whereas heterosexual means you identify as being attracted to the opposite. I don't even know. Can you explain the
Yeah,
difference between heterosexual and
sure.
cis, if that makes sense?
Absolutely. Yeah. So one of those is communication of a gender, identity or experience, and one of those is a communication of attractiveness or sexual
Okay.
orientation. And so
Oh, okay. That
heterosexual would
makes
mean that you're
sense.
attracted to the opposite gender. I do want to separate out sex and gender, and
Yeah.
we could talk about that as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, so heterosexual would be sexual orientation, who you're attracted to, and cisgender is communicating gender identity or experience. So another word is transgender. So that would be
Yeah.
that the gender that was assigned to you at birth is not the same as the gender that you identify with.
Yeah.
So those terms I think go back to like physics or chemistry. I chose
Sure.
OT because those are not my
Yeah.
strengths.
Yeah.
But I know, cis along in a really watered down version means same and trans means, different or change.
Yeah.
So those are just like where the words come from.
Good, good. Well, this is so cool, and I love this conversation. Now, when we go to OT school, and especially now, and I think it's as it should be, there is so much more conversation that revolves around making sure that, you are being intentional with the client that you're working with, and whether or not you, what you understand, what you believe. If somebody's in an inpatient setting and in the chart you see that they identify in a different way that you like maybe that you would understand. Let's talk about a cisgender. Like, let's say I was in the hospital and I, you know, not this that this is me, but as an example, maybe like I was like, well, this is a, biological man from birth, but identifies now as a woman. And tell me, like, and I've had this, we talk about making sure that one of the number one things that you do as an OT or as a therapist, a healthcare provider, is build rapport, right? And tell me, how important is it for somebody to walk in that room and identify you in the space that you want to be identified. Like, what does that do for
Mhm.
that therapeutic relationship?
Cool. So I'm gonna wind back
Sure,
a
sure.
bit to some of the language, and then I'll lead to
I'm
answering
sorry.
your
I'm sorry.
question.
I'm
So
trying. I'm trying.
no, you're good. But it's a good time to clarify for some audience that might
Yeah.
also hear that language. Also, just as someone who has, a lot of my career was in travel therapy, I've been around and still heard some surprising language in my time too. So I know that it's being used. So when we're talking about someone's current, sex identity or gender identity, we wouldn't refer back to or look back at maybe
Bio.
how they were previously identified, and we don't want to minimize things to biological perspective because
Sure.
not only that like pathologizes a social experience, right? So gender identity is something that was created in society. We could have a whole podcast series on the
Yeah.
history of where gender comes from, but that's
Yeah.
that's a social phenomenon that sometimes we try to relate to biology in a way to dismiss like what that experience is, right? So biology is totally different from a gender experience.
Gotcha.
So we wouldn't it would be harassment or even a microaggression, in some states definitely like reportable, to kind of use that language about somebody. So for clarification, because
Wow,
I
I
know
am
it's
so
still
glad that you're
used,
talking to me because like I'm learning so much and because I don't know either, and I assume that a lot of my
right?
audience doesn't either. So this is great. It's great for me to, be able to learn, in this space. So, so anyway, carry on, carry on.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
So if the person in that bed says I identify as a woman and my pronouns are she, her, we would just talk about that patient as a woman and use
Yeah.
she, her pronouns for
Yeah.
her. If, in that conversation, their anatomy or some of those biological markers like chromosomes and things were
Sure.
relevant, or maybe they were there after maybe like a gender, in some states they call it a gender reassignment surgery, we'll call it just affirming surgeries. Um, that might be relevant in some conversations, but I also want to just offer this perspective where like how many other times when we're thinking about maybe someone who's cisgender heterosexual do we really focus in on that content of the person?
Right.
The honest answer to that is we don't, right?
We
So
don't.
we're already kind of like othering, and
Yeah.
it's this kind of voyeuristic curiosity about different experiences that makes us kind of in a way cross these boundaries that we wouldn't be really exploring as much with other folks. So
Sure.
sometimes we just have to take a step back and say like, yes, I'm curious, but is this where I answer that curiosity? And in a professional perspective, the answer is no.
No. Yeah.
um, but for that person, we're talking to OTs, right? So if we're talking about someone who's transgender and they identify as a woman, but maybe they're the genitalia they have is still a penis and a scrotum, because of course that doesn't identify someone's gender or validate their gender
Sure.
identity. We might have to have some knowledge as an OT about how we would navigate that and the best way for them, right? So
Yeah.
maybe someone who's a transgender man wants to urinate while standing up, and that's what they need to do in their state because legislatively, if they're not, presenting with some sort of an outline of a penis, someone might question their ability to enter a bathroom, and there's actually like legal repercussions for that, right? So
Yeah.
we might need to navigate that with
Yeah.
them as an OT. So we could explore stand-up P devices, and so that's kind of where that gender experience and their anatomy would be relevant in the situation. But in most experiences, it's probably not, right? So I encourage OTs and health professionals to kind of ask themselves like the what and the why. Do I need this, and would I require this information from other people? And also the zoom out, zoom in approach of like, what am I actually focusing on? Is it toileting? Okay. What do I need to know about this toileting for this client specifically?
Sure.
May that involve their anatomy? The same route for every OT is, what does this mean to them? What is the environment, and how is the best way for them to do it?
Yeah.
So then it's, navigating that with whatever, things are included in that
Yeah.
situation. So that would be the best practice, from my perspective in that situation.
Well, that's awesome. Like, I'm like again, I love that I get to learn in this space here as well. And I was in inpatient rehab for quite some time, and part of that is you do your showers and toileting and everything. So to de-emphasize the things that aren't necessary are is probably such a huge and empowering thing. And again, building that rapport, because eventually, they need to trust you, and no matter who it is looking to be able to find somebody that can help them transition to independence, and
Yeah.
that really is the name of the game, when we kind of break everything down, so being able to do that with as much dignity as possible without, making anything a big deal is huge, so um, that's awesome. Were you going to say
Yeah.
something? Yeah,
Yeah, there's the second part I think to your question was like how important is my, our identity or one's identity or gender experience kind of in our healthcare. And I think that the easy answer to that is it's an individual experience. I think the true honest answer though is it's always going to be important. I've alluded to some legislation or policies in some states that currently exist. And, I'm not going to spend time being super political, but healthcare, is political. We have to be
sure,
aware of policies that might actually influence the care we can provide that
sure,
contradicts what our practice framework tells us we could or should be doing, right?
yeah,
So, the ACLU has identified, I believe, as of yesterday, over 515 anti-LGBT plus laws that are new that have been introduced in this year alone that already surpasses the total amount that were introduced last year. So, um, our identity is important. In some states, we're not able to get like the life-saving care or basic care or equitable care, the same type of care that everyone
yeah,
else is getting. For me, it's been important. I've talked before on podcasts, and I've written about it in some of my textbook contributions of just, I have a lot of trauma and negative experiences, which is not a unique experience for a queer person in the
yeah,
healthcare setting. I've been personally harmed and violated by a healthcare professional. It led to me not coming back to a healthcare environment for several years because of
wow,
interaction of multiple traumas, I've experienced, which is also not, a unique experience for queer folks. And in that time period, I had a health condition that I wasn't aware of that developed further to a place it probably wouldn't have if I had routine care.
sure.
And, we could easily say that's because I didn't go, but then we can talk about the larger issues at hand
And
about the
then the
things
trauma
that
and all that, yeah,
right prevent people from marginalized and minoritized communities for getting the same access to care, right? What
yeah,
happened to me wouldn't have happened to another person in a healthcare setting, and so that's why it does matter. But I've
sure.
also come across people in my practice who identify within the community where they don't personally feel like it's a large part of navigating their healthcare at this time in their life. So usually it is an individual experience, but I also have to talk about, it does matter on a lot of large levels and decisions that we make.
Well, I appreciate like this is so great again for me. Let me ask you this: in a space where like even in this podcast, I have made mistakes. Like saying like biological and things like that because I don't know. Like and you know me, I'm not being intentionally negligent and harmful. I just am ignorant, in a lot of different ways. What would you say to a community that's trying to learn, like, and of course you correct me very elegantly, and I know that, I don't have malice there. I just don't know, Um, if you're in a space, and you're going to treat a client that you accidentally say the wrong thing, how do I walk back from that? Is it grace? Is it like trying to empathize with the situation and ask for forgiveness, or let me build from there? What's the best way to kind of build that back?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I think the option is to walk forward. And
Sure.
so it's not, wrong as the individual that makes a mistake to feel badly about that. Usually that's coming from a place of compassion, which I would want you to have compassion towards other humans and what matters to them. But really the focus is on just apologizing for the mistake and moving on. And I would say most importantly, doing the individual work that you have to do to not continue to make those mistakes again in the future. And so if we're talking about pronouns, for example, and you're working with a client like me that uses they and he pronouns, and you're only using he pronouns for me, that's still misgendering, right? So when I say I use they and he pronouns, the way that I communicate that is I would love them to be used equitably. They use both they and he for me. Or if you use she pronouns, right, I'm communicating I don't use those pronouns. So if you use those for me and misgendered me, you would say, I'm sorry, I'm going to do the work to not make that mistake again.
Sure.
And that's pretty sufficient there, right?
Okay.
And then the real apology, honestly, is in doing the work, to taking the time, that like few seconds that it actually does take to say, okay, their pronouns are they and he. I'm going to use they for them, and kind of go forward with that, and put that
Yeah.
intentional work. That's the real apology. But in the moment when that happens, apologize for it and move on. If we make
Yeah.
it a really long apology, you end up redistributing kind of the focus and the power in that situation
Yeah.
to putting that person in a situation where they kind of want to placate to your feelings, and try to make you feel better about, hurting them, even if it wasn't intentional. So, brief apology, acknowledge that you were wrong, and then do the work to not make the mistake again.
Yeah. And I think, I want to talk a little bit about pronouns too, because I know that one of the conversations we had had was being locked into something you identify with in that moment, and I believe you identified as they, them at one point. Is that correct, or am I wrong there?
Yeah, there's a time along, me figuring out myself where I use they them pronouns to communicate my identity. I use they he pronouns now. For some reason, Zoom won't let me change them to they he, but is intentional with putting they before he, for me personally. So, I think we kind of get stuck sometimes in life with, what our own experience is with it maybe, and don't understand that like gender experience or life experience for other folks is not rigid, right? Maybe it's rather
Yeah.
fluid. And so for me, it wasn't until after college where I kind of was like had the mental health support and, family support and right friend group to, have that space to kind of like explore that, and people that would support, navigating that language with me and
Yeah.
supporting me with that. I'm very fortunate to have the people around me that I do. And so, um, it's tough because when you don't have a lot of representation about maybe what, exploring this looks like, you just use what you have in front of you. And so they
Yeah.
them language was kind of what I had. I didn't know that double pronouns existed. I didn't know that, there's even with the terms, and I could talk also all day. Like I use the term
Right.
non-binary to communicate to other people about, what, it helps you understand what my experience is, but like non-binary, I don't really feel like accurately
Yeah.
communicates my experience with gender. I think Dev is probably, I'm just Dev, and that's the best for me. But uh, you know, I there were expectations, where I thought like non-binary I had to be some sort of non-binary. And so it wasn't until I kind of was like, that doesn't really feel right to me. I experienced some dysphoria with that as well, where, um my masculinity and what masculinity looks like for me is really really important to me, and it is important for me to exist in that way, but I also, am really at home with my femininity, which, and kind of the space in between that, which is where, I think that they pronoun for me represents that. I use they before he because people see he they pronouns and think, oh, I can use either or. I'm more comfortable with he, so I'm just going to use he for Dev, but that wouldn't be representative of who I am. So
Yeah.
I put they first, so you see it first. And the honest conversation usually is if it truly is too difficult for someone, and in the moment they can't, do the work or put the effort in to use both pronouns. I'd rather people actually just use they and
Yeah.
acknowledge that part of me, instead of seeing the part of me that they're probably more comfortable with.
This is great. I also mentioned, but this is a very individual decision. Like people
Mhm.
don't have to, be the same. So for me, like I've always been a very feminine male. And I've always known that, I kind of shake my head a little weird way sometime. I love Taylor Swift and I'm openly, love different things, like you know, and I might be saying this wrong, a traditional feminine draw for my interests And not and that is changing, but if we look back, these traditional feminine draws, and actually people have thought I was gay, and people have thought I was this or that or the other, but I have always said, I'm kind of a feminine guy, and I'm very okay with that. And I think I'm also okay with identifying as he, him. I think men are attractive. I think that I also obviously think women are attractive. My wife is super hot. But I think even for me, it's like it's okay for me to still love certain things that have been labeled on a feminine perspective, and I love that we talked about how this can evolve and this can change. And, maybe you like, I think right now I want to identify they, them. So I'm going to try this, give it a go. And you know what? That doesn't really seem to fit who I am. So maybe, you know, uh, something else fits better for me. And until that it fits, you might be exploring that. And I think a lot of people, and I have family members and I have friends that have tried to explore this, and maybe they want to identify a certain way, but dress completely opposite. It's still something that, we're trying to figure ourselves out. And it's a lifelong journey to figure out who we are, right? Um,
Yeah.
so I love that, I think just in general, as we're learning, it's a constant like, hey, let me understand how I can be better for you, and what I can do to support you, to love you, and show that, no matter what, I can still be a great human for you, with grace, um, when I make mistakes, so,
Yeah.
so we have to do that. So, all right, well, we got to move on a little bit because I want to hear some more different things. But this part of the podcast I call the OT Unleashed actual segment, and this segment kind of highlights your greatest, kind of in your opinion, achievement with a specific client, or maybe an amazing intervention that you did that you were so proud of, or some kind of personal success or achievement. And of course, you have the Rainbow OT, and you could obviously say that's the thing, and I'm so proud of it, which as you should be. But is there anything else that like strikes a chord in you, like a breakthrough with a patient, or anything that is, just rings true to you?
I know you want me to pick one, but it's Pride Month and you can't really tell me what to do. So,
Fair, fair.
yeah, so I've been fortunate to have a lot of moments, and a lot of them are tied to, I think, my identity and being able to at times use that as a tool in my therapeutic use of self. One moment that comes to mind with a patient is, I had a patient in their 70s, let me into their identity, and some would say, come out for the first time in their life,
Wow.
which was a very overwhelming and emotional experience for them, in a very rural part of New York. And so to be the person that was
Wow.
able to help them break through to that, is something that, like,
Ah,
I could pass away
yeah.
tomorrow and feel like my life is
My
accomplished.
work is done here.
Yeah, I'm new to academia. I've been at Ithaca College for a full year now, and so I had a moment this year where a student who identify or is figuring out their identity actually, came up to me and had this moment after class where they just were like, I didn't know until I had you how much I needed a professor that was like me, and we both had this moment where we just started crying because I didn't know how much, it meant to me to be there to be the person, that I needed for someone else.
Yeah.
So that was magical. And I've had a lot of moments that, I've been able to have like that through the Rainbow OT, and kind of maybe be the only or first person at their program or an OT that they've seen that looks like them. Not the only, there's a lot of us out here,
Sure.
but I certainly have taken up some space at times on social media. I think what I'm most excited for, as hoping that it ends up continuing to work out. But I will be starting a gender affirming OT clinic here at Ithaca College.
Cool.
And we're a nonprofit, so I can offer free services to the large community we serve here. And I have an SLP colleague that is very near and dear to my heart, Dr. David Bain, who I'll be doing a interdisciplinary OT SLP, gender affirming voice and OT group with them as well that we're developing. So I'm very excited to kind of continue to find my way on this path that is pretty new, I think, to our profession and to me as well. So
Man, that's so cool. I'm so excited for you. What a fun journey, life, is, when it throws you something, you're like, hey, I think I can go down this road. And actually I have a few things that are popping up for me soon, and not ready to talk about it yet, but it's cool where our journeys lead us.
You know,
So,
I'm going to make a sexual health and intimacy joke here, but you really do keep teasing us as the community who are big Eric Johnson fans about these fun things that you're doing that you keep telling us you can't tell us about. Stop being
yeah,
that influencer, Eric. We're all on our
sorry.
toes waiting.
Well, here's the thing. The reason why I am hesitant to throw everything out there is because I want to respect the people that I'm with right now. And
Mm,
if I decide that I want to talk about something, other than what I'm currently with, I think for lack of a better term, it's disrespectful to the current
mm,
people that I have committed to.
sure.
And I think that a big part of me saying like I'm excited to talk to you guys about certain things, and I'm excited about what's in the future, and I'm excited about working with somebody that I can't talk about. It's more kind of out of respect for them, and also I'm protecting me in a space that says I want to share something that I'm very excited about, and I want to say that right now, but I also don't want to put all my eggs in one basket or count my chickens before they hatch, all those things, right? And
Sure.
so, so I think that, there's a lot of dreams that we have, like, and I know that you've had dreams that have built upon, something else, and then finally you're in a space that it actually can come to fruition, and I think that's with me, I think that for me, I have a lot of interesting little talents that I could go in 100 different directions. OT will never leave me ever, but that doesn't mean I don't want to explore life, in big ways. So anyway, so yes, I think probably by the fall we'll all know what the next journey for OT Unleashed is. For Eric Johnson is, let me put that way.
Okay.
So we'll see. I'll give you a fall. You'll probably know something pretty decent something by September, October. There you go.
I expect
There's your
the
tease.
inside tea. I better get a
You will get
September
the tea.
release
You'll
date,
get the
Eric
tea. So.
Johnson.
All right. Well, this is the part of our segment that that I like to call quickfire queries, and no pun intended. Uh, sorry.
That's a good one. I'll give you
Sorry.
that. I'll give you that
It's
one.
always been the same word. So, and this is this part of the podcast where we do a quick question and answer, fun facts about you, like what's your favorite ice cream, stuff like that, which isn't one of your questions. But we're going to do it fast. You don't have to explain it. We're just going to pop down and we're going to learn a little bit more about Dev. Are you ready?
I
Okay,
think
here we
so.
go. Here we go. All right, first things first, what is your favorite coffee or drink order?
Right now I'm into London fogs. But
Mm,
I also love a black coffee
okay.
and
Wait, so a
hibiscus
London fog
tea.
is a tea, right? Yeah,
Yeah, it's like, oh God, I don't even know. I think it's Earl Grey tea
I think
and
so.
some milk and some lavender.
Yeah,
It's just real nice
yeah,
and light, but yeah, I'm trying to transition away from too much coffee. So some
good.
hibiscus iced tea in the summer and some London fog.
Okay. All right. Good, good, good. All right. Any movie or show that you've recently been like binge watching, or movie that you just have fallen in love with that you would recommend for our audience?
The sport that I'm most faithful to is RuPaul's Drag Race, so always recommending that to clients. I also think in serious terms, drag is definitely under attack as an art form and an occupation in several states, and so people are afraid of something that they just
Yeah,
don't know about and don't understand that drag is also a pretty big spectrum and a lot of different things. So
sure.
RuPaul's Drag Race, my favorite sport. That's a clear joke. You didn't laugh at it, but you should. And I would say favorite show is Schitt's Creek and favorite movie
So good.
Dune 2. Yeah.
Who's your okay? So Dune 2. Who's your favorite character in Schitt's Creek?
In Schitt's Creek, that's a terrible question.
Yeah, they're so
But
good.
yeah, I think my favorite character would be Moira Rose.
So Moira is so great, and Catherine O'Hare has
Hmm.
decades of amazing, roles. As a matter of fact, my son Fox is a huge, huge fan of Nightmare Before Christmas, and of course, she is Sally, and also one of Lock, Shock, and Barrel. And we are just this morning watching her live perform. Um, Nightmare Before Christmas, and oh my gosh, she's got this gorgeous voice, and her ability to jump in and out of characters is just like incredible. I love her so much, and Moira's like so perfect in that show. That whole show has so many amazing, pieces and elements. The character building, it is just so good. So that's awesome. And then
Yeah,
you said Dune too, huh?
yeah. My partner and I are into the Dune movies. I think the scenery and costuming is pretty stunning. So we're into those. We actually just bought all the books to read them as well.
Awesome. I thought about kind of getting into, I think I years ago read the first book, but I think I want to revisit all that. But we loved Dune 2, and, it's never enough. You want the next movie, and
Yeah.
I can't wait to see where they go with it. And, Chalamet's characters. I mean, Zendaya, I mean, everybody is so good in that show, and they're doing a really great job with it. All right. We talked too much about this question. Okay, last book you read.
Last book I read, uh, Disability Visibility, edited by, is it Alice Wong? Yeah, I'm just stressed in the moment, putting me on the spot. Great book. She just came out with a new book, Disability Intimacy. So definitely recommend both for any healthcare professional. It's a series of edited short stories and vignettes and poems
Cool.
from people with various disabilities and experiences. All of her work is amazing.
Oh man. Well, I will have to write that down. Is it healthcare focused? Is it for written for healthcare providers or just anybody?
Just anybody, but I think it's important for healthcare providers that
Sure.
are constantly in environments with people with disabilities and disabled folks that they are understanding of the varied and non-monolithic experiences
Yeah.
and develop more empathy for accessibility and inclusion of people with disabilities.
Cool. Cool. All right. All right. What's your favorite go-to like OT model or frame of reference that you personally rely on?
I would say like the PEOP model is probably like my bestie. I feel like it is a pretty versatile model. It's for me when I address gender affirming care that I would say is the driving model for me until maybe I develop one that makes a little bit more direct sense. Hopefully in the future, maybe sometime, but I think just really can I like the science of navigating the blend of those together, and I feel like we can always find a solution to problems with not just problems, but just things we want to navigate
Yeah.
with that model. So love that one. Also a big fan of the Kawa model.
Yeah. I Michael Awama is amazing. I love that is such a popular model in general. Um, I'm a big fan of the intentional relationship model from Renee
Mm,
Taylor, and
yep,
she's of course the late wife of I mean she's the widow of Gary Kilhoffner, who was Moho, so
yep.
it's a beautiful one. And I talk to students quite a bit about, sometimes you're going to go in, and with the IRM, you kind of learn about changing your modes and who you need to be for your clients. And sometimes you think like they need this, and you realize quickly they don't. They need something else. Then you gotta kind of
Mhm.
figure out what that is. But that's awesome. Love that. Love that. Any favorite song that you're jamming to at the moment?
I love a lot of old music. So Aretha Franklin is probably like my favorite artist. So
Wow,
been getting, just listening to a lot of Aretha lately and usually, honestly.
that's
Like Tina
awesome.
Turner. Yeah, I like yeah, good old big soul R&B blues
Yeah,
music. So
yeah. Awesome. I love that. We do my family, we take on road trip every year, do something special, and we have these road trip rules where we make yeah, there are all kinds of different things. There's 22 rules, but one of the rules is always when you meet somebody new, you have to ask them what their favorite song is, and what their favorite movie is. Like you at a gas station, paying for your gas, you have to ask the person what's your, and then we put it on a road trip mix. And
I
so,
love that.
and you get everything. It's like Amazing Grace, and then you get like, I don't know, Def Leppard and Tina Turner or whatever. And so it's like all over the place, but it's so cool, to see different people who love different things. So, okay. So, and by the way, I am putting together an OT Unleashed podcast, Spotify playlist off of everybody's favorite song. So you're welcome. You get to be on that. All right.
Yeah.
What is on your phone, one app that you cannot live without?
Probably Instagram. Yeah, that's where I spend most of my social media time. I don't have a TikTok. I did make one to keep my name in case I ever wanted that space, but yeah, Instagram is where I spend most of my time, I think.
All right, Instagram. I love Instagram as well. It's easy. You can get in, get out. It's pictures. It's beautiful. I love it. All right, favorite dessert? And you said you don't really have a sweet tooth.
Yeah. I would say like my partner just made like the best cheesecake I've ever had. I'm very fortunate to have a partner that makes delicious cheesecakes. So he made a blueberry cheesecake for me for my birthday yesterday. So I'd say like right now that's what my mind is on.
Yeah.
My favorite dessert though is a tres leches cake. It's a
Oh,
traditional
yeah.
Mexican cake. Yeah. My grandparents used to spend a lot of time down in Texas in winter, like right by the Mexican border. And so they picked up a lot of that culture and brought that home. So it was
Yeah.
a grandma special for me.
It's so cool. It's such a unique cake, and for those of you who have never had tres leches, it's literally three milks,
Mhm.
and you actually pour this sweet, milk onto this bready cake, and so it's so good, moist, like it has to be super moist,
Yeah.
super super good. It's almost like a really like yummy put together bread pudding, like because it's so
Yes.
just delicious. But you have to try that. Okay, cool, cool. Tres leches, I love that. Well, and that cheesecake sounds baller.
Yes.
All right, favorite self-care strategy for you?
Well, right now, I would say my favorite self-care strategy, the two that I go to the most, also living in the Northeast where we have snow most of the year and I don't like that snow. I would say like playing video games as a leisure task to unwind and as well as spending time out in nature.
Yeah,
I live with Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, and so my mobility has definitely been increasingly impacted over the past
yeah,
year. So I'm definitely trying to soak up as much as my body can do,
yeah.
as long as it can do it now. So more nature, but definitely big love for video games too.
Well, I'm gonna do a bonus question here. What game are you currently into? What are you playing these days?
What am I playing these days? I'm gonna sound like a 12-year-old teenage boy,
This is
but I
fantastic.
have gotten back to Fortnite.
Yeah,
So I have a dear friend that lives in Seattle that I've been reconnecting with, which I love. That's my favorite part about video games is just
yep,
connecting with people you love from all over the world. So all of my family and everyone is 2 hours away as well. So we've had a lot of game nights and late night game sessions, which has been honestly really great therapy and wholesome. So Fortnite I've been playing a lot. I would say my favorite game right now to date though is Baldur's Gate 3.
mm,
That game is
so
incredible.
good. Yeah, so good. That's awesome. I love that. I The only thing I don't like about Fortnite is the building mechanic, and I know you can play modes without building, but I love a lot of those first-person shooters, the Halos, the Call of Duties, all those things. And then when Fortnite came out, I was like, "Oh, this is cool! It's such a cool game." And then it was like, "Oh my gosh, I have to like learn like a whole new mechanic, like building things like on the fly quickly." And that was always, it's kind of like a Minecraft, Call of Duty like mashup almost,
Yeah.
so that was really, really, really cool. But all right, I love it. All right, any hobby that you've always wanted to do but just haven't yet?
Uh Well, I have a very specific answer, and I have a broad one. The very specific answer, it's not necessarily a hobby, but like I've had this delusion in my mind that I've always wanted to be able to do like a split and or an aerial, which are both like advanced things that I don't have any of the foundational steps for. I cannot even do a cartwheel. But for people who don't know, an aerial is a cartwheel without your hands, and a
Yeah.
split is not something that I could do or should do with my condition. But those are not hobbies, but like in terms of dance, I always wanted to do that. I'm hoping to get into like resin jewelry and like
Yeah.
pressing flowers and making resin jewelry. I have
Yeah.
mushroom ones on
Yeah.
now. But yeah, I've been getting back into art a lot with my partner, so I'm
Good.
hoping to get into that as a hobby.
Resin is such a fun medium, and I'm glad, I
Yeah,
love that it's become more and more popular because it used to be where people didn't even know how to use resin. It was like, what do you do with this? Like, it wasn't really a hobby. It was more like you know, you go to a trophy shop and they'll like, you know, turn your old like corks into a resin table or something for you. So
right.
that's cool. That's cool. All right, last question for you on quickfire queries. What's worse, weather is too hot or too cold?
Too hot. This body is not built for heat. I can definitely do the cold. I think you can build up, but you can only take so much off, both
Yeah,
like in society and in general. So,
yeah.
yeah, definitely cold.
Uh, I mean, you mean too hot? You like colder
I
weather
like the
better?
cold. Yeah,
Yes, not
no,
the
not
hot.
too
Yeah.
hot. I sweat like if I breathe when it's 80 degrees. So,
That's awesome. All right. Well, we have one more. Section for you, the sage stage. But before that, I should have asked this question earlier, but I want to ask this question because I want, I want to challenge you just as much as you challenge me. And I
mm,
think one of the things that I have seen as I learn is that we can all be wrong in some ways. And what I want to know is that, like when I look at the LGBT plus community, it seems like they have all the answers. And I'm not saying that they do, but, they're very proud of what they represent. But would you say that there's some areas that they don't get right, or some areas that maybe that community, our community can be better at? Does that make sense? Where it's like,
yeah.
we all play our roles, and like, how can we, what is something where you think like we could be better in this way?
The yeah, speaking to, I guess, my community itself, I have two answers to this because I want to talk. I think you kind of talked about like as a non-community member, what would be from
Sure.
that perspective a little bit too. So I'll answer that one first, I guess. And I think that kind of maybe is getting back to like for things we don't understand, or maybe things that
Yeah.
we think maybe are like
Yeah.
outlandish or whatever, one's perception might be. But this is good because I wanted to get this phrase in here earlier. But I think, and this is actually a direct at Brock, our good buddy. But this
Yeah.
is something that I got. We're gonna chew on this if I'm back on Brock podcast sometime. But I really want to say and challenge everybody to get out of this like space of comprehension. And one of my favorite activists, Alok Menon, talks about the urgent need for compassion. And one of the ways they phrased it is, we like to water it down. We're not going to understand everything. Like the full, honest, fun example I give to folks is like, I don't understand vulvas. They're not my thing. Like as an OT, I've had to learn about like what a vulva slash vagina is, right? Like I don't have to have comprehension over the things to care about it, right?
Yeah.
I don't have to understand what it's like for a person with a vulva or a uterus to have the right way to care taken away to care about that, right?
Yeah.
And so I think sometimes the things that we're like, I don't understand that. Why are they asking for this? I think like the maybe the best route for all of us to take is just to be like, maybe I don't have to understand that to care about it, right?
I love
I
that.
can't speak for the whole queer community and say like that I understand what every identity or person's experience, what the demands are because I don't have that same experience. But I don't have to understand that to deeply care about it. I don't have to understand that to listen to them and try to get some more knowledge about their needs
Yeah.
so that I can better advocate for and amplify that.
Yeah.
But I really think we need to get out of this place of comprehension. And I'm calling out Brock because at the end of my podcast interview with him, we kind of had a little bit of a disagreement, I think, about comprehension. And so I don't think we're always going to understand it. I don't think that it's fair to demand, an individual or community to come up with the stuff to educate you on understanding something that's important for them all the time. I think a lot of us have a goal to educate, but I think sometimes just care about it. If someone's
Yeah.
saying like we need this and this is really important to us, maybe we can start about caring and then learn along the way.
Yeah.
I think within my own community, the queer community has a lot of faults. There's a lot of racism. There's a lot of fat phobia. There's a lot of things going on within our community that we see in intimate spaces and just in general community spaces. As an OT and a disabled OT, queer community spaces are very infrequently accessible. A lot
Hmm.
of social spaces also involve like alcohol and other things that are just not inclusive for all folks. So I think as a community, to shout out my other community members, I think that just we literally all need to be better at that, right?
Sure.
And just more accepting of people within our community and understand their needs. I'm
Yeah.
about to go to Pride this week in Ithaca, but I already know there's like some spaces in town that require access through curbs, and there's maybe
Yeah.
no entrance that really works for people that maybe have a wheelchair or a mobility
Sure.
aid. So I just think we need to be better in a lot of the ways that society needs to be better. We're not unique just because we're a marginalized or a minoritized community does not mean that we don't have the same faults. A lot of our rights as a queer community come from the activism and lives of queer people of color, specifically like trans women and
Yeah.
queer people of color throughout history. And so I think it's really important to remind people of that, to give
Yeah.
that credit, and also make sure that we're still focusing not just on the diversity part. I feel like we're doing a little bit better there, but like when we get people in these spaces, how do we make sure that they belong? It's accessible, it's equitable, and it's inclusive for them, right?
Yeah.
So making sure we're doing all of those things and righting our wrongs through justice. So
Yeah.
that's my answer to
You're
those three
you're
questions.
so well spoken. I love it. I said that was gonna be my last question, but I have one other question, and this is a question because sometimes I feel this way for who I am. Um, what do you ever feel like you're trapped with having to be the rainbow OT? Like, do you feel like you want to be bigger than that? Like, I don't want to only be known as this person. Because like for me, it's like, oh,
Oh
you do
yeah.
video games, Eric, or you do the army, and that's it. And it's like, well, like I'm bigger than that. I love people. Like I want to talk like bigger mental health stuff like that. Do you ever feel trapped in like this, identity?
Yeah, absolutely 100%. That's part of the reason why I kind of like the Avatar The Last Airbender disappeared off the face of Instagram for
Yeah,
besides stories, like honestly like 3+ years. I think I struggled with my identity as an OT because I love my focus on the LGBT plus community. That is always going to be a forefront for me. I love my focus on gender affirming care. That is always going to be a forefront for me. But I'm also like a really strong clinical OT, and I've done a lot of like neurological training. And so oftentimes I feel like I get typecast very
yeah,
strongly.
yeah,
It's not a read for you, right? But like I have an abundance of requests during
yeah.
Pride Month, right?
Sure.
I'm the busiest I've ever been every June. And I love you, so I'm happy to do this with you. But I turned down a lot of requests during Pride Month because these conversations need to happen also in July and every other month that
Absolutely,
exists, because
absolutely.
we exist in all those months.
Yeah,
People are voting in other months, right? So we should be having Pride conversations all throughout the year. But yeah, I get reduced, I think, to just that, and I don't want to say just that as if it's not the
sure.
thing that I'm super proud of. But I'm also, a strong clinical OT, and I
Yeah,
I
yeah,
bring that experience as a traveling OT. I have an abundance of experience there, so I just I think for me, I appreciate when all parts of me are seen, and I think a lot of times when we know me as the Rainbow OT, so we see me for like
rainbows.
mostly LGBT plus stuff.
Yeah,
Meanwhile, like I'm also have a lot of experience in sexual health and intimacy, and so
Yeah.
I've kind of been chronically trying to make sure I'm included in those spaces too, because
Yeah.
sometimes we don't include sexual identity and sexuality in
Yeah.
sex and intimacy too. So yeah, definitely get, still working through that. But
Yeah, well, and this is similar. Like I get tons of requests to be on like keynotes or podcasts during like Veterans Day, Memorial Day, like when it's
mhm.
like military times, it's like, hey, you're like, yeah, but like veteran suicide is all year long. That's happening
Right,
every day,
absolutely.
and so
Yeah.
I appreciate that you say that. I think, for me, it's like I want to celebrate you and I want to celebrate the community and I want to personally feel that I have a space that I can also outwardly show that I'm trying to do a part that does support the community, and so I'm sure that most people that are reaching out to you, in their own way are trying to, you know, uh, be as supportive as they can be. And of course, you're such a, for lack of a better term, ray of sunshine and such a beautiful rainbow in our community. So, yeah. But all right. Well,
Yeah, I
I'm
appreciate
going to
that. I
leave
think
you. Go ahead. Go ahead.
okay. I think what I would just encourage other folks to is just yeah, I think oftentimes we expect people from communities to kind of lead these initiatives and conversations, which we should, offer that and look to people who have that experience, but also know that a lot of us are super tired. So like I got to a place of really, really deep, dark burnout
Yeah.
and not okayness, which
Yeah.
is why I stepped away from some of the expectations that were put on me and are still put on me that I'm trying to figure out how to deal with. So student groups love doing stuff with students, but yeah, same pressure to you all, right? If we're talking about some asks from the community, like let's have us talking about Pride and
Yeah.
LGBT plus stuff in all the other months, please, and space out some work also for me,
Yeah.
please, so
Right.
I can
Right.
breathe and enjoy my Pride Month a little bit. This work is, I feel safe with you, and this is really meaningful for me, but talking about this stuff and attempting to gracefully navigate questions and hearing language like it does build up on a person, so just consider that for people that you're asking to do work, and when you're asking to do work, that's not at you directly, but general people in the community, because we're happy to do the work, but we're also super tired, so
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
help us out. Yeah.
All right. Well, I do need to wrap, but I want to leave you with the last word, and this is my last segment that's called the Sage Stage. And you have given us so much already, but in this segment, we basically give you an opportunity to leave some sage advice for OT practitioners, students, our community in general. Is there anything that you want to leave them with, coming from our conversation, the things that I've learned, all the, or something we haven't?
I feel like I'm satisfied with a lot of the nuggets I've dropped, but if I were to drop one more golden nugget, I think we've talked about the word ally and throughout the show, and I really want to encourage folks to transition to accomplishship. I don't honestly know
I
if that's a
love
real word, but
that.
we're going to go with it, right? And so you might hear the term like active ally. I go with accomplice. I believe I got that terminology from Dr. Ryan LaValle and Dr. Kalia Johnson, two of my favorite folks ever. But we need more than just like putting up a pride flag and language, right? And some things like, because what I mentioned earlier, there are 515 anti-LGBT plus bills that are targeting
Sure.
access to rights, like human rights, basic human rights. So it's we're beyond a need for like language and marching in support, and we
Yeah.
need actual action, activism, advocacy, and that is through voting, right? So I'm not going to tell you who to vote for because I wouldn't do that, but I'm going to tell you to be mindful of who you're voting for, right? Read what they support, look at what their supports are, because we have some big decisions coming up. I would tell you to like consider your consumerism, right? It's Pride Month. Is some random like store all of a sudden selling Pride stuff in binders, or is there a trans-owned or queer-owned company that sells that all year long that you could better support?
Yeah.
For the people in your life that are queer and trans or gender expansive, whatever the term may be for them, listen, ask what they need. Let's like assumptions are just they don't usually help us, right? So maybe get out of the comprehension, get into the compassion if you care about them, just see what they need and try to help with them, help them with that on small and large levels. But I do think the pressure on the folks is we need more help, we need serious action, we need straight heterosexual people to have these conversations in places
Yeah.
where queer people don't exist. We need these conversations when you hear your really dear friend or even, your elderly relative saying something that's maybe harmful. You can take a moment to educate them or provide them with some resources.
Yeah.
It does have a different reception when it comes from you versus maybe the person they're already perceiving as other. So we're needing more. The pressure is for more, and so we're asking for more.
That's awesome. And so you said don't use allies, use what's the word that you used? You said
What was
don't
that?
you said don't use ally, use the word
Accomplice.
accomplice. Okay, I love
Yeah.
that. Yeah, because that
Get
assumes that
dirty with us.
yeah, awesome. Wow. I feel like I have learned so much in this podcast. And, Dev, I cannot thank you enough for being on. And I'm sorry that this is June. I wish that I could. No, I can. I actually would love to have a whole segment on just some pronouns so we can understand them a little bit better. So maybe we jumped it on in, August, September, and maybe we should grab Brock along and have the three of us banter.
Ooh, I would love that. I'm gonna hold you to that. That
Okay.
sounds like a
I
great
will
time.
I'll reach out to Brock. All right, well you guys, it's time to say goodbye. Keep exploring, keep dreaming, and continue to unleash the extraordinary in the ordinary. Thank you for joining us on the OT Unleashed podcast, where we always encourage you to engage, to cultivate, and to unleash. Thanks again, Dev. Peace.
Thank you.